friends. Welcome to Art in the Raw, conversations with creative people. Tonight, I'm excited to introduce you to art dealer and gallerist Catherine Couturier. If this is your first time watching, you might be wondering who I am. In a nutshell, I'm someone that's been in love with art and music basically my entire life. I've now been working in the professional art world for about 15 years now, and I started Art in the Raw about halfway through 2020 to keep people connected and inspired. If you see value in that, consider subscribing and telling like-minded friends. If you'd like a little bit more information about the show or tonight's guest, take a look at the description below. Welcome, Catherine.
Thanks, Anne. I'm excited.
It's been too long. It's good to see you.
You too.
Tell people where you are.
I am in my house in Houston, Texas. Houston is fantastic. It's just, we're getting into that season where it's the weather and the mosquitoes and the flooding, and that part's the bad part. But everything else about Houston is fantastic.
And your gallery.
And my gallery, world-renowned Catherine Couturier Gallery, located in lovely Houston, Texas, where I'm not currently because it's 8 o'clock at night. Otherwise, you would see me sitting in my gallery where I am about half my day, every day, 7 days a week.
So you have owned the gallery for 14 years.
Exactly.
And didn't sleep for the first 3 years you owned it?
That's what I always tell people. Anytime someone talks about wanting to open a gallery or any small business, I say, I did not sleep for 3 years. Like, I woke up panicked about something, just couldn't rest, couldn't turn it off at all. And if you can't handle that kind of stress and worry and life, then small business ownership is not for you. After the first 3 years, I thought I at least kind of knew what I was doing enough to be able to settle into it. It did not mean that I did not still wake up and panic at 3 a.m., but I would be able to say, it's going to be all right. It's been okay the last 3 years. It's going to be fine tomorrow. Don't worry so much. So I can kind of ride the wave a little bit better than I could at the beginning. But it's tough. I mean, not just the gallery business, but I think any small business. Cash flow is a big deal in the gallery business, as I'm sure you know, because it's a luxury good. It's not something people are going to buy necessarily with any regularity. So there's absolutely no way to know on the first of the month what I'm going to sell, or if I'm going to sell anything, how much I'm going to sell. There's just no way. And so for someone like me, who's very type A and likes a plan and to stick to the plan, that kind of uncertainty month to month. But now I understand the bigger picture and I can handle it, relying on myself and knowing that it's going to be fine. And that if there's a problem, I can figure it out. And I've figured out every other problem. This business is definitely a feast or famine business. And I think anybody that's been in it for a while, if you are at the feast, you know, the famine's right around the corner. So you definitely are paying attention, you know, to money on a very regular basis. A lot more than I wish we had to, I'm sure. Probably most business owners wish they could do kind of the great parts and the fun parts and the really fulfilling parts instead of sitting there and paying bills.
So obviously you love it. You're still doing it. There is that kind of perception that people who own galleries, work in galleries, it's just this totally romantic thing. And we're all just out in black cocktail dresses, drinking champagne with artists and clients. There are those aspects to it, but you're doing everything, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's, you know, back in the day, because I worked in a gallery for about 9 years before I owned one, but people would always go, oh, you work in a gallery like Charlotte on Sex and the City. And I was like, she's independently wealthy. She's an intern and she's never at work. And that is not anybody I know in the gallery business. Gallery business is vaguely ruined by Parker Posey's amazing portrayal of every anxious, neurotic New York gallery owner who always wears scarves and has coffee and, you know, black dresses and is like, I'm leaving for therapy, goodbye. You know, reality of the gallery business is something I told my husband the other day. He was at the gallery helping and he'd cut his finger and he was like, do you have a Band-Aid? And I was like, a Band-Aid? This is the art business. You put a paper towel and a piece of tape and you move on. Like, if we had to stop every time we cut ourselves on glass or a frame or mat board, or, I mean, you have to just roll with that. You have to expect that you literally will bleed at this job.
You don't want to bleed on the mat board, right?
Exactly. You have to get that blood real quick away from the art, which is why there's always some kind of like cloth or something, to clean. And you just get masking tape or, painter's tape or whatever's handy. And you just got to move on.
You're selling art, bleeding, packing things, fixing things.
Yeah, I fix the toilet at least once a year. I mean, that whenever anybody thinks that all I do is sit around being glamorous, I'm like, oh, if only. But that being said, this is a fantastic business. I love pretty much everything about my job.
And as part of that story, you basically raised your two children in the gallery.
My son's almost 16, so I can pretty much put that he survived it. My daughter's about to be 8, so we'll see if I can keep her alive a little bit longer. But yeah, I mean, I've had so many girlfriends that after I did it, where I was kind of working full time and had the children full time, have tried it because of course that's a fantastic thing to think you could manage. And they've all quit pretty darn quick because it's insane. It's completely crazy. I did it because I didn't feel like I had a choice. And I think people in general, but especially women, can do pretty much anything if we feel like we don't have a choice. Because there were 8 years between my kids, I had very much romanticized what it had been like with Andre there. And then my little Stinkerbell came along and she was a terrible baby, like terrible. And I was so stressed out. And I was like, I don't remember it being like this with Andre at all. But of course it was. Every one of my collectors basically has been handed a baby with a dirty diaper, has seen me breastfeed, I've gone, okay, do you want to get the print out or do you want to hold the baby? Because you have to choose one. It's a good way to kind of keep things in perspective, focus on what's important to get done in a day, and realize what things you are going to have to let go, have to give someone else to do, or the things that, you could make yourself crazy about that maybe really aren't that important when you're having to choose between a screaming baby and, tweaking that blog post for the 5th time. You kind of go, you know what, the blog's fine. Like to think at least that it's given my kids maybe a little better understanding of what goes into owning a business, how hard you do have to work, but also it teaches them things like what not to touch. They can walk into basically anyone's space and just inherently know, okay, I'm not going to go over there. And they get exposed to tons of great art, and they've met so many neat people, and they've been given really amazing photographs by artists, and they are living their best life as my hair all falls out.
I would say one thing I admire and appreciate about you is you approach this art world thing as a very real person.
I really appreciate that because it definitely is. Part of it is that my personality is such that I don't think I can basically hide it under a bushel anyway. Like I might as well just lean into it. But also, one of the things I really hate about the art world is the kind of inherent snobbery of it and the elitism. And I'm really, really anti that just in every aspect of my life, which of course is funny, right? Because I'm an art dealer, for God's sakes, who speaks French. I mean, like how much more like ridiculous could I be while I'm going, oh my God, stop being such a snob. But it really does stop a lot of people from getting into the business, and it stops people from just thinking they can walk in the door of a gallery and go look at art. Like, why they should not be intimidated. It's a store at the end of the day. Like, yes, we've got bigger aspirations and we want to help our artists grow these great careers and build good collections for our clients. But at the end of the day, the doors are open. Come in and look at the work that's on the wall, and don't be worried, and don't think you have to whisper, like, unless you're saying something you literally don't want me to hear, because maybe you're like talking shit about me, like whisper. But otherwise you can just say something out loud. I'm just going to sit at my desk and work. So I definitely try to stay as kind of welcoming and open and things like that as I can be. And really that is just my nature. But I also think it would do everybody good if we could kind of get over ourselves a little bit in the art world.
I personally think it's fun when people don't know a lot about art and have questions, but a lot of people are really uncomfortable with that. So I would imagine your general nature would be helpful in kind of just calming people and making them feel welcome.
I've been told that. One of my collectors I've had for a long time, we were at AIPAD, which is the biggest photography fair in the States. So when people come in the gallery or someone comes in the booth, they say, if I can help you, let me know. Basically, I'm not going to bother you if you don't need anything, and I'm just going to go do work, and I'm not going to hover around you or whatever. But anyway, so I said, if I can help you, let me know. And that was it. And she told me about a year later, after she'd bought all these things, that is why she bought some things from me. She said that she was so sick of going into galleries, not being helped, not even being spoken to, all this stuff. And I was like, yes, but I say that to everybody. She's like, yes, but you meant it. And I was like, of course I meant it. It's my job. Like, it's my job. But she said, she went on a big rant, and she's very fancy and, from the East Coast. And she said she was just sick of that overall kind of, that nature that makes you feel snubbed a little bit, because she definitely took it personally. And I said, oh, honey, I mean, I walk into galleries all the time and don't get helped. And I am an art dealer. So, you got to take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, I think that everybody would just be happier if it could just be a more inclusive world. That being said, sometimes if you walk into a gallery and the person doesn't ask to help you, it's because they don't know how to, because a lot of times they're kind of babysitters and they don't actually know what to do if you have a question, or they're new, or, whatever. That happens sometimes too. But in general, I know some people just want to be left alone. I mean, they really don't want to feel bothered. So I just say, if I can help you, let me know. Otherwise, have fun. So
I have run into a lot of people that are into street art, see this giant mural, and they get really into it. But the same person, if they're going to go into a space where art is encapsulated in black frames and white mats, it's just this whole other vibe, and people are not comfortable. I would like to see that change.
Yeah, and I think part of that is because just of price. I think that people assume that everything in a gallery is $1 million. And of course it's not. I mean, I put labels on the wall that have prices on them. I have labels on the prints and the bins that have prices on them. There's prices on my website. It takes out a lot of that part of it, because a lot of people, at least in the South, where we were very much, brought up to not talk about money, to have to ask those questions feels embarrassing, as though either I'm supposed to already know how much stuff is, or maybe, I'm unsophisticated if I, if I have a budget, maybe this is wrong. And it's like, absolutely not. That things have value, and it has to be something that you want, for that price. But at the end of the day, you can still get a really great photograph for $1,000 or less, which is not true in any other medium. That's a big selling point for photography for sure. But I've noticed, I'm in a strip with like 10 other galleries on a couple of blocks. When we used to have big openings, more people would congregate in my gallery than they would in the other galleries. And I never quite knew why, because it wasn't that my space was the biggest or the most inviting or anything like that. But I think people don't feel as intimidated by photography, because even if they go, oh, wait, maybe I'm supposed to get something from this picture of a tree, and oh my God, maybe I'm stupid, because that's how people feel in galleries. But they can still rest assured that that is a picture of a tree. They don't have to feel dumb. And so, again, getting people to relax about that stuff and not feel quite so judged is definitely something I would like to continue to do.
But you have a philosophy that you're not necessarily selling, that you're presenting work that you believe in, and educating people about it as well, which has always been my ideal mission. I feel like the educational component is important, and if people love it and they have that connection and they can afford it, they will buy it. So I love that you've just spelled that out there. And I think all of that is important, and also contributes to just people feeling comfortable.
Yeah. I mean, I always say that I don't sell people art. I just facilitate a sale. I mean, that if they have questions, I can answer them. And there usually are a lot of questions when you're, buying anything that's important to you or expensive or anything like that, but that there's nothing pushy about me at all, because I don't want people to go home and not be happy with what they've got. The downside to that is I never get work back. So if a piece sells out, I'm like calling my clients, do you want to sell this? And they're like, no, we love it. Darn. But I do like that. And people sometimes ask me too many questions just because they're not confident enough in their collecting yet. And they'll say stuff like, oh, well, I really like these two. Which one do you like better? I go, not my house. And they go, no, but tell me what you do. I said, I'd just buy both. Because unfortunately for my house and my budget, I would just buy both. But I don't want people to go home and be unhappy and it be on what I did at all. You shouldn't push people into buying something, number one, that's expensive, but number two, is supposed to add to their life. It's supposed to make them happy, or fulfilled or challenged or something. And it doesn't need to be what I like. It needs to be what you like. I mean, basically, I like everything that's in the gallery. So that I wouldn't have put my name behind it if I didn't like it already.
It is a very personal experience. And the reason one piece might resonate with me and go home with me versus you might be a very different and maybe personal thing.
We all just like what we like. And I tell people that a lot too, because I get, people who again have these kind of excuses, or they're feeling embarrassed about whatever it is. Oh, well, I don't know anything about art, and, I just like what I like. And I go, okay, cool. Well, here's the short answer to all of that. There is good art and there is bad art. That's not completely subjective. Certain things are good, certain things are bad. But within the good parts, we all like what we like. A lot of us like the exact same things, which is why certain things get really expensive or sell out or become famous. But in general, I mean, I can like print A and Anne can like print B, or we can both like print A. And the great thing about photography is we can both buy it because there's more than one. I love that kind of democratic aspect of buying photography over other medium as well. That kind of everybody can be all kumbaya and happy and like positive experience for everybody.
I always defer to, I know it when I see it in terms of art that I love, that I'm maybe going to collect or just have in the gallery. And I've run into a lot of people that want needs to be more reason than that. But I really strongly feel if you see it, you feel it, you know it. Do you agree with that?
Oh, completely. I've definitely had people, again, usually it's kind of when they're new to collecting or they're just indecisive by nature, and they'll go, oh, well, I don't know. I mean, I like this one, but like, is there anything else I need to know? I said, you can just like it because it's pretty. Like, we all like beautiful things. Like, it doesn't actually have to be anything else. I mean, I think art schools in kind of the 70s and 80s really did a big disservice to a lot of artists, making them basically think they have to have this entire concept to begin with. Well, then you've got people who've spent so much time on concept, they forgot to make actually good art that looks good or is well presented or is well created. And it doesn't have to be all of that. I mean, when I have artists go, oh, I'm working on my artist statement, I'm like, I don't care about artist statements at all. I say that, you need to make the work you're going to make, and the art historians can figure it out. It's not like Monet or Van Gogh or even Michelangelo were sitting around being like, what is my motivation? What is my concept before I even pick up a pen? They're making art because they had to make art. And I think we would, again, that kind of gets out that inherent like elitism that everything has to be so important. You can just like it. You can even look at it and go, I don't even know why I like it, but I like it. Great. You should have it. Put it on your wall if it makes you happy.
And I think that can also be really kind of inhibiting for the maker of the art as well. We are not working with artists that are just all over the place. But when you get so wrapped up into perhaps your artist statement and this concept, and it's not just coming from that artist, then there's something kind of broken there.
Totally agree. And I think that also is one of the reasons, and rightfully so, that galleries are kind of mocked. And I mean, I was an art history major too. So, art historians in general and art critics, like we're about the same age. So you may have watched Designing Women back in the day. There's this great episode where the friends go to an art opening and there's just a blank pedestal and Julia puts her purse down on it. And then everyone runs around going, oh my God, it's genius. I have to have it. What's the price? I'll pay 10,000. I'll pay 100 million, whatever. I mean, there is some of that that's true, when you do see something very, very simple and they've come up with such an elaborate backstory. But what I always tell people is if I can't get what you're going for by looking at it, then it either wasn't the right, you didn't do something right. Because either you made up the artist statement, which is fine by me because I don't care about them, or you were going for something and it failed because I should be able to look at it and see it. You've got a photograph and it needs this much explanation on the wall next to it. I'm not interested. It needs to be a visual thing. This is a visual medium.
I always say I want to see it, feel it. And then if I read the statement and it adds to that, that's even better. But if the statement is necessary, yeah, something's missing there.
Exactly. If I literally can't tell what you're going for at all, then you failed. I mean, I'm pretty sharp. So if I can't get it, then maybe it's because it's not there. It's also people, I think a lot of times when they are coming up with a concept or a theme or, whatever you really want to call it for their work, a lot of times they put as much pressure on themselves to be sophisticated as these collectors do. And I'm kind of like, everybody can just relax. Like you can go out and take pictures of trees that are really beautiful because you really like pictures of trees that are really beautiful. And that's what you like to see. And that's what you like to make. And that's what you like to do. You should go do that. It doesn't have to be any deeper than that. And, you know, even when I go to museums, and I'm at museums a lot of the stuff you look and you go, it's really beautiful. Even if Manet has had this, you know, huge history in art and we can all piece together things, sometimes he just painted the pretty thing. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with liking things that are beautiful. The idea that people think that that means they're not as sophisticated or not as smart or something like that, I'm like, that is not true at all. Not at all. Most of what I have in my house, as I kind of look around, even the ones that do have tons of backstory and do, you know, have a big concept to them, or, you know, whatever it is, they're beautiful. I like beautiful things. And that's not just in art, that's in every aspect of my life. Again, it goes back to that idea of just there being too much pressure for people kind of to perform and be sophisticated, and it's just snobbery. And it's like everybody should just like what they like and be happy. And artists too, you know, make what you want to make. You don't have to worry about it that much.
Exactly. I've been asked by artists, what should I make that would be more saleable?
Me
And I
too.
hate that question. That's the worst question. That's
The
like,
worst.
that's like, why are you even trying to be an artist?
Exactly. Like you want to sell Volkswagens, not
Mhm.
Saabs.
Yeah.
Saab even a car anymore? I don't know. I don't know anything about cars. But you would want to sell the popular thing. Like I get that. I'll say, oh, I can't sell this work. And they'll go, oh, well, what can you sell? Maybe I can. And I'm like, no, no, no. It's not how it works. But also, I mean, good luck finding an art dealer who knows what they're going to be able to sell that year. I mean, I always say on December 31st, I can tell you what I'm going to sell in 2022. But until then, I have no idea. I just have to put up work that I think is really good and that I think my clients will like, because I do run the collection of a few of my collectors. And so I know in general what's going to appeal, but that's also why certain collectors come to me, is because they like my eye. So my eye is definitely on everything in the gallery. I mean, at the end of the day, it's my name on that label. It's my name on the door. I have to be able to kind of stand behind it, that it is my taste. That being said, there's stuff all the time that I see and I buy for myself that that are artists I don't represent, because I don't think I can sell them. And it doesn't do the artist any good to be on my walls if I can't sell the work. I'm able to sell it to myself, but that's not my job. You know, my job's to help artists have a good career and help collectors build their collections. That really is the job.
And you also work in both contemporary and vintage. You have a
Right.
kind of a preferred way of working when it comes to that?
No, and it's so cyclical. I mean, you know, during the pandemic, for really the first two kind of solid years or year and a half, I was getting no inquiries about any kind of the mid-century street photography that I have, or anything kind of vintage or, you know, 2000 really. And people were really just looking for really, really contemporary stuff. This year, it's been completely different. I'm still mostly selling contemporary, but I'm getting a lot of inquiries about older work. So I never really know one day the next. I mean, I think it's on my website because I've said this a lot of times. But people say, you know, what do you specialize in? And I say photography, and they say, what kind of photography? And I say good photography. I don't have to be in that much of a box. I mean, if you're in New York and there's 70 other photography galleries, you got to find your little spot. I was the only photography gallery in Houston for a long time. And now there's two more, but we deal in very different types of work. The other two are both strictly contemporary. But that thrills me. I mean, I think the rising tide raises all boats, and I am super glad that there's other photography galleries in town. But yeah, no, I like all of it. I think it's nice to be able to do all of it, because as opposed to if I were dealing in paintings or sculptures, you can't kind of buy a bunch of things and stick them in drawers. So photography really lends to having just a lot more physical pieces in a collection and a lot more pieces in the gallery. So it's fun. I mean, it's fun to go out and try to find things for collectors. It's very fun when someone comes in to sell me something that I actually want. Some of the haggling, the negotiation, stuff like that's kind of fun too, because I'm a bit younger than a lot of the dealers, and there definitely are people who think they can get over on me. And I'm like, welcome to try. Like, have fun with that.
You might be younger, but the number of hours you've spent in that industry, knowing that medium, I'm sure exceeds most people that walk in the door. So there's always that weird ageism thing sometimes.
Well, and it's sexist too, to a certain extent. You know, I'm used to that. I mean, I started doing this when I was 22 and I'm 44. So literally half my life I've been sitting at the exact same desk. mean, there's something great about that, but one of my clients was in not that long ago and he said some compliment. He's like, oh, you're really good at this. And I said, oh, thanks, honey. And he goes, and it's a good thing because if you couldn't do this, I mean, you're not like qualified to do anything else. And I was like, what? I mean, yes, I am. He goes, no, you've only worked for yourself for like 20 years. Nobody would hire you to do anything. And I was like, no, and I realized, oh my God, he's totally right. I have got to keep this going because I mean, what else have I done? And like, what could this translate to? Okay, I'm really good at art installation. I'm just going to be an art installer.
Art installers make a lot of money, but on top of that, I'm going to disagree. As a creative person, I think you would take what you know and you would translate it and you would do something else with it. That's my opinion. That's just my opinion. So that's
very sweet of you. I always say that I would just send an email to like all my collectors and be like, hi, I need a job. Does anybody have one? I also tell my husband I would do that if I were single. I would just send out an email and be like, look, I haven't dated since I was 20. Don't really know what to do. Don't really want to put a bunch of effort into this. So if you've ever thought it was cute, please send an email to dating@catherinecouturier.com. Be in the About Us section. There'd be a pull down that just had me, basic stats, name of my children, amount I owe on my mortgage, all the important things for a second marriage.
The dog's name.
Oh, my husband gets the dog. If we get divorced, the dog's going. The dog's name is Luby, after a chain of cafeterias in Texas called Luby's. Side note about Luby's. So if anybody, I don't know if you ever watched King of the Hill, the niece, her name's Luann Platter. So a Luann Platter is actually a plate at Luby's cafeteria. So that's definitely a Texas joke. There's a lot of Texas jokes in that nobody's going to get if you're not from here. And that's one of them, because I always order a Luann Platter when I go to Luby's. So when that show first came out and that was her name, we all died laughing.
Well, when I come visit, we'll have to go and maybe we'll take the dog.
Okay, I'm gonna let you go in first.
I read somewhere or heard somewhere that you were looking for non-crazy artists.
I did not know that was in print, but I definitely would say that. I mean, when artists are like, what's advice you could give to artists if they want to have a career? I'm like, okay, I mean, I have just a few points. Number one, always, is if you want this to be your job, you have to treat it like a job. You cannot, that idea that everybody's like flaky and just wakes up whenever they feel like it and, just flits around. That is not true for any successful artist. They get up, they work their 8 hours, they go to studio, they come out, they work every day, or at least 5 days a week. And you have to, because if you don't, you're not gonna get anywhere as an artist or in any job, right? So treat it like a job. Another thing is when you're approaching a gallery, doing submissions, whatever it is, again, treat it like a job. Don't call me and be super rude on the phone. I mean, it's a job interview at the end of the day. We're going to be working together. But the other thing is, yes, don't be crazy. Don't be hard to work with. That even though my artists are not usually in Houston, they're definitely not like right down the block. You have to work really closely with, if y'all can't get along, it's just not going to be a good fit. Because I mean, I had an artist once, I said I was selling a lot of the work and I had to send it back because every time I even saw the artist pop up on Instagram, the hair on the back of my neck was standing up. I was that stressed about that relationship. And the artist was just super, super, super needy, calling me, on Sunday and saying, hey, do you have 5 minutes? And I'm like, sure. And then would keep me on the phone for 3 hours. I mean, I was kind of like, I cannot do those. I would keep somebody a lot longer just because I liked them, even if I wasn't selling their work, and I will send your work back so fast if you're a pain. It's just not worth it. There's so many good artists out there, and there's just only so many hours in the day, and there's only so many years in my life, and I'm not gonna waste them being really upset because of one relationship.
Well, and the fact of the matter is these are serious long-term relationships.
You don't want to have a bad breakup or anything like that. And I really haven't had any of those, but I can also spot them usually now. I mean, at the beginning, I was such a purist. I was like, the art is the only thing that matters, blah, blah, blah. You learn real quick. That's not true. Things like, is the artist going to get me what I need to complete a sale on time? If they say they're going to ship it, do they ship it? Is it going to arrive damaged? Is it, that they just fall off the face of the planet and don't even respond to emails for a month at a time? Those are the kind of things where it's the dog.
Well, because that makes you look bad.
But yeah, no, because you can't throw your artists under the bus either. And so, I mean, that happened a couple of years ago, or I guess right before the pandemic, so maybe 3 years ago. The artists just had not done what they said they were going to do. The collector kept saying, I don't understand why you're telling me these things that are ultimately not happening. And I'm like, I also don't understand why that's what I'm telling you. I am doing the best I can with the information I've been given. And I'm really sorry because again, it's my job to protect my artist reputation as well. So I can't just point fingers at them either. I just have to say, you know what? My name's on the invoice. It's my fault.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I don't have any ego, so it doesn't bother me a bit.
Yeah. But you want to avoid being in that position.
And you just have to kind of vibe. I mean, that they kind of get what you're about and they like you too. I mean, that, it's not as though I haven't gone plenty of times missing emails, but yeah, having personalities that kind of click is good, but you have to be able to work together. So they need to be just like a good team. And I'm really lucky. I mean, I have really fantastic artists who are really easy to work with. They make every day a joy. So I'm really, really lucky in that regard.
Well, and it's a pretty young medium, relatively. The fact that some of the people we work with know a lot of the original pioneers, the fact that we're not that far removed. I don't know anybody that knew Monet firsthand.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly it. I mean, I would say most photography dealers knew Brett Weston, for example, like not just some of them, but most of them, most dealers have met Ansel Adams. I mean, I'm a little too young for that, but I know all the wild stories. I've heard some really excellent stories that are more things you tell at a bar about, some of the really most influential people in the history of photography. Everybody palled around, and that's really neat.
And I don't deal as much with vintage work. I deal more with contemporary work, but what I think is really fun about vintage work is it almost becomes this exploration where a print surfaces and I don't know what it is, but perhaps we know people that can key us in and little details of it. So it almost feels like this like treasure hunt.
For sure. I have a great story about that from just like last week. So I went to Chicago for Expo Chicago, and there wasn't tons and tons of photography there, but the photography that was there was just completely top notch. One of the things I found were these vintage black and white Eggleston photographs. And Eggleston's, really, really known for color work, but this was before he even made a big splash in color. My dealer friend said, these aren't 70s prints. These are 1970 prints, which is just a whole nother moment in his career. Anyway, I bought him from this great gallery that has an outpost in Memphis and one in Nashville called David Lusk Gallery. And there are these scenes, and David said they were from a wedding that Eggleston had done these photographs at a wedding, had given these prints that he'd done right away. So they're as vintage as they can get to the bride. The marriage had soured and she sold them because Eggleston got famous. So that's how they kind of got back on the market. Well, anyway, so then I kind of posted them on Instagram, and an artist named Catherine based in Memphis, she said, oh, I hope you got those from David Lusk. I know this woman who's friends with that family, of the people who got married. And I said, oh, can you give me her information? So now I know all this stuff about the wedding, about the people that are in the pictures, all of that kind of stuff. It's like the neatest thing when you can find out, And then she was kind of like, I'm not sure which child this is. And then she was like, oh, my friend just posted on Facebook a picture of her little girl when she was little, and it looks like the same girl. And it's an old picture of Eggleston's, but it's not that long ago, So that stuff is so neat because it is like a treasure hunt. That's exactly what it is.
To be able to piece in those stories.
I mean, one of the reasons I like social media is that kind of interaction that you can do, kind of engagement with people. I think a lot of people just think of it as you're supposed to just send things out, but I don't. I like kind of information flow in general, but I like meeting people and everything else and seeing what everybody else is up to. And it's paid off in this kind of storytelling a lot of times. Because again, I just like to surround myself with people who, are really experts and really, really smart. And it's amazing the things you'll learn if you pay attention.
And with social media too, that's always something that's suggested is engagement. But I also think sometimes people just try to engage because they hear that's what's going to make them successful on that platform. versus the people who are just naturally engaging are the ones that do it right.
I keep things as light as possible. Again, I'm not good at faking, so I don't think I could cover up my person, like that aspect of myself, even if I was trying. I don't think I could do it. And I think that even though I try to keep the gallery's Instagram account at Catherine Couturier Gallery, I try to keep it, pretty straight laced. Every now and then it goes a little off the rails, especially if I put in pictures of my kids or things like that, just because I just can't be that uptight. I'm not good at it. I'm just not that straight laced. I'm just not.
Being real. I mean, why not? Like what?
What are you scared of? I mean, that's
Yeah.
the way I say it. And I say this about my kids too, is that my kids are the exact same as they were when they were like 2 weeks old. I mean, the exact same. So if we can maybe grow a little bit or expand, but we really can't change any of us. So you might as well like just lean into it and say, well, this is who I am. Even if I wanted to change, I couldn't. So might as well try to embrace it. It's not really that whole love yourself thing or anything like that, but it's, there's a certain point where you can't beat yourself up for being who you are anymore, because there's nothing any of us can do about it. And trying to hide that or fake like that's not who you are is not going to bring the right people to you. The artists that come to me, my clients that come to me, people in the business, friends, it is because of something that is inherently Catherine Couturier, not any airs I'm putting on, because I'm just not good at it. Just not good at it. I used to try a little bit because I'm from this really small town and I have this country accent. I used to think, oh, I need to like class it up. I'm from Crockett, Texas. I sound like I'm from Crockett, Texas. That's okay.
Another place I've never been.
I'll take you. They'll let you in. They'll show you the sites, which are numerous, as you can imagine, in a town of 7,000 people in East Texas.
Road trip. I read somewhere that you had noted that you couldn't teach people to be collectors, that you're either a collector or not a collector.
Yeah. That urge is just there. I was doing things when I was little, like, 6, 7 years old. I was collecting bookmarks. I was, had all these things, and I would spend time, organizing them and, kind of cataloging and all of those sorts of things. Some people, they just don't want to acquire anything. My mom's kind of like that. I mean, she definitely has art on the walls. As far as really just owning a bunch of stuff, it's just not her nature. Most of my collectors, photography is just one of the many things they collect. If that's your nature, that's your nature with anything that interests you. I'm very lucky that my husband, while it was not specifically art, but he collects coins, he collects all sorts of things. So he understands the mentality and is supportive of it. I think the worst case scenario is basically if one person's a collector and the other one is kind of an anti-collector, there's always going to be clashes. But my daughter earlier, we were trying to change the sheet. She has this like loft bed. And so we had to throw all of her stuffed animals onto the floor so we could change the sheet up above. And I said, oh my God, we call her Stinkerbell. I said, oh my God, Stinkerbell, you have got to get rid of some of these stuffies. It is awful. You can't even see them because there's so many. And she goes, I'm a collector, Mama. I said, you're a hoarder. There's a difference. She goes, I'm a collector. And I walked off, and I thought, she might be. She might be. But that idea of how do I classify these things? What do I need? What am I missing? What do I need to go actively look for? That's just a collector mentality. You cannot teach that. You cannot. A lot of times when people do start to really focus their collecting, it's because they've got so much that they know that they have to stop just buying everything they want because they'll never run out of things to buy. So usually then they say, okay, I'm going to have to kind of focus up and do something, with a little more purpose than just that I like it. And great collections get built out of that thought pattern. So it's always really neat to see when someone has kind of done a deep dive into whatever it is. I like pictures of people kissing. There's a lot of things like that, or, collections of children or collections of dogs or collections of whatever it may be. It can be really, really interesting to look at art through that lens and see something where the subject matter maybe has something to do with each other, and to see the breadth, the collection, when maybe a lemon is the only thing that ties it together, but nothing else does. And be able to see how great photography is and how so many different artists can take the same subject matter and just present it in a completely different way, say something completely different about the human experience. I love that. Love it. It's really fun to go out and look for things that are that specific.
So maybe they started their collection of just things they love. You could look at it and figure out what's missing. If it's alphabetized, what's missing between.
Exactly. What's the K? Yeah. And I have a few collectors that I can all but buy for them without even asking, because I know their eyes so well. I know exactly what they have. I know what they want. I know what they need, but also I just know what they like. And so it's great when I do kind of stumble upon something and I can just text it to a client real quick and be like, oh my God, look what I just found. That's because I've worked with the same people for so long. And that's always really what I'm looking for in collectors, is that kind of long-term relationship. Same with artists, but I definitely like that, getting to the point where I really do know them and, know their eye and know their collection and know what they're passionate about. That's really fun. And I like that about all people anyway, even if you're not a collector. I like to figure out what makes people tick a little bit.
So how about your current photo collection? You're living with photography all day at the gallery. There's the photography you've selected for there and then for your clients, but the photography that makes it home with you, that's a whole other level, right?
It has evolved so much and it changes so much depending on whether or not I'm making money, of course. But originally, I had no money. I was working in a gallery business. I was 22 years old. And I would find something I loved. And literally had no money. And so I'd ask the artist, can I pay you off $25 a month? Can I pay you, $30 a month or whatever? And they would always say yes, because they just could see that I really wanted it. And I think in general, artists, they know the difference between whether or not you're, buying to stick it in a warehouse for an investment purpose, or if you really want to look at it. So yeah, I have a big stack of Maggie Taylors, and Maggie will tell you I paid all of them off $100 a month. I sent my little checks for 12 months, 18 months, whatever it was. And so now, once you become a gallery owner, people don't want to give you quite as long a payment plan, which is fine. But the last few years, the gallery's done well, and I've been able to buy a couple of prints that really were on my wish list for a really long time. The one that I was kind of like have always wanted, it was always my number one print. And I bought it last year. And I told my husband once I got it and put it on the wall, I was like, did I even want this? Or have I just wanted it for so long that I've forgotten if I even liked it. Turns out I still do. But it's also that, I keep bringing up movies, but in The Princess Bride, one of the greatest movies of all time.
Agreed.
At the end of the movie, Inigo Montoya has killed the six-fingered man. He's been in the revenge business for his entire life since he was 7 years old. And now he doesn't know what to do. That's me. Now I'm kind of well, I don't know what is my goal now? I've become this kind of, existentialist of what's it all even mean now that I don't have the number one photograph I want. But
that was your
I'm lucky.
conquest.
Yeah, I need a new conquest. And I still have 5,000 photographs I want, not exaggerating. So I think I'll probably pick another number one. It's hard to say no sometimes to things. And that's the problem. If you are a collector and a dealer, it's a constant struggle of just wanting to keep everything for yourself and then saying, okay, I can't be good at my job. I can't keep my gallery going if I don't sell things. But there's been a couple of portraits the last couple of years that have shown up that I know I could have sold to someone really quickly, but I was like, mine, all mine. Sorry, it's going home. But I buy a lot of contemporary work too. It's definitely not mostly vintage. It's not, at this point, it's not mostly black and white. I think that's mostly where I started. I'd say it's mostly color now, especially contemporary artists. Crazy about Maggie Taylor that I represent. I've bought quite a few. Patty Carroll, who I represent. And last year I bought quite a few. I cannot resist her. Sig Harvey, who I think is just one of the best contemporary artists working right now. So those are what are right above my desk. So that's fun. But I also, I have little pieces that I bought at an art auction that are, hanging in the hallway that I love just as much. I'm very lucky. Being in this business is the only reason I've got an art collection. That's a big, big perk of working in the gallery business.
Well, you're able to also live with the work.
When you've stared at it already every single day for 7 weeks while it was on the wall, if you like it or not.
Exactly.
So yeah, we're in a really good business. And of course, I get a bigger discount than I would if I were just Joe Schmo off the street. So that's definitely, as far as fringe benefits go to the gallery, I think that's just about number one.
Do you collect anything outside of photography?
I buy other forms of art a little bit. I don't in general, because number one, it's more expensive and I have a small house and I need to be very, very particular. But I just bought a couple of watercolors not that long ago. Actually, my framer is a printmaker and she's great. And so I've bought some of her stuff. As far as other things, my house has flooded twice. And after you lose basically all of your belongings a couple of times, your desire to own a lot, it lessens. So even things like, I had a really good collection of first edition signed, really important photography books and things like that. You know what? They're hard to save in a flood. A lot of them got damaged. They're incredibly hard to move. So that stopped. And I basically don't buy books anymore. I buy books to read, but I don't buy books to collect. The first flood we didn't know was going to happen. The second flood we were pretty sure because it was like just monster hurricane that was coming. So I had taken the good books out of my bookshelves and put them on top so that if the water came up, they'd be safe. But the water was in the house for so long that it wore at the wood of the bookshelf and collapsed the bookshelf. So everything still fell in the water. So I was like, okay, well, when you lose kind of that much stuff, you realize how little stuff you actually care about. Now I just buy things I care about. And that's mostly just art.
Added perspective.
Yeah. But my son started collecting art kind of during the beginning of the pandemic. We were doing this blog series called Safe in the Studio. And I would get each of my artists to write about just what they were doing. They were trapped at home. And then they would show some recent pieces. And for a week, we'd give everybody a 20% discount if they bought one of those like 3 or 4 pieces. It was super popular, really successful, loved doing it. So anyway, one of the artists who'd done that was Patty Carroll. And she had this picture has this picture that's kind of a very blue room, kind of flickering TV screen. And, the figure's kind of asleep/dead in the chair. There's a popcorn bowl like tipped over, all over on the side of the floor. And my son, who was, I guess, 13 at the time, he goes, "Can we buy that?" And I said, "Yeah, honey, why?" He goes, "That's what COVID feels like to me." So it's right by where he plays video games in the house. So that's the first thing he's ever specifically asked me to buy. And I thought, oh, okay, like he gets it. Like he gets that owning art can add to your life and things like that. He started a little collection of Buddhas. I don't know, he's really into guitar now. So he's got this whole thing that he's doing with that. My son seems to be doing at least mostly with a discerning eye, which is neat to see.
I love that. And I know and love that Patty Carroll photograph
So
myself.
good. So good.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the type of thing that if he was not raised in a gallery, I can't imagine there's many kids of his age making such requests from their mother.
Right, because they don't know that that's even really an option. And he does know that because, of course, I'm constantly bringing things home, changing them. He actually helps install at the gallery at this point. So he understands that that is something that's attainable, achievable if you want to buy these things. He has another couple of really great photographs artists have sent him because I do have such great friends in the business. Henry Horenstein sent him a photograph of Buddy Guy, the blues musician. And because I took Andre to see Buddy Guy perform, and Buddy Guy at one point, this has nothing to do with my job, except that this is cool. And my job is cool. Buddy Guy hops off the stage, is playing in the crowd. This is, one of the best guitarists of all time, 85 years old. Jumps off the stage, walking through the crowd, walks right up to my son for some reason, plays at him, and then hands him his pick, and then goes back up on stage. I immediately was texting people who know kind of that blues scene and the folk scene and stuff like that. And one of them was Henry Horenstein. And so I was going to Boston for my consulting job the next week. And he said, "I have something for you." And I said, "What is it?" And he said, "Open it." And it was a picture he'd taken at a folk festival in Philadelphia in 1969 of Buddy Guy for me to give my son. And I was like, that's so cool. So Andre was like, just completely blown away. As I said, they're living a very cool life. Same thing. I, got something from an artist not long ago, and the artist included this little dog picture for Charlotte, AKA Stinkerbell. But she was like, "Oh, I hope Stinkerbell likes this." And I was like, that they're never going to be intimidated to walk into a museum or a gallery. They're never going to think that they have to be dressed up or anything like that. They know that this is just something that a lot of people do. It's a important thing to a lot of people. My dad collected art. He always says before he had children, and we took all the money, but he was a teacher, so it's not like there was any money to begin with. But my great aunt was one of the first private dealers in Houston, and she again was a school teacher. So this was just kind of a side gig, and she would sell my dad's stuff at cost. So I grew up with art on the walls, even though I was in this little town in East Texas with 2 public school teachers for parents. Again, I always knew that was something that you could do. I mean, that I think a lot of people just don't, it never even crosses their mind that they could buy art. They think that art is something that's reserved for museums, and they don't understand that people are making it all the time. You can buy it yourself.
So it runs in the family for you as well.
It does, at least on my dad's side. But like even my mom's bought things over the years from the gallery. She actually bought a Patty Carroll 2 price increases ago, and now decided she wanted a bigger one before the next price increase. So I'm like losing money hand over fist with this woman because she is getting things at an incredibly good deal. So yeah, it's okay. I mean, again, my mom would not have grown up ever even considering buying art, but because she was living with it. That's really neat to see. I just sold 2 pieces to one of my collector's daughters. When I met this collector, she was probably 4. And she's graduating from law school. It was just really neat to see how people do kind of grow into it. That being said, you can have one child that'll completely go down that path and the other who won't. I've got an artist who definitely, had a very fancy lifestyle as her children were growing up, and she's lived all over the world, and her kids have had really neat experiences. But she said that, her son decorates in timeless Home Depot. So it doesn't just always rub off. I mean, you can expose people as much as you want, but sometimes either they just don't value it, or they just don't get it, or they just don't have that kind of taste,
Right. I guess sometimes growing up with around something, you either maybe you don't appreciate it because you see it so much, or they just get it.
Right. And this collector's daughter is not buying, she's not interested in a single thing her father would be interested in, and vice versa, which is also really neat. But she definitely knows that it's something you can do, that you can actively be an art collector because of her dad. But there's definitely a lot of things that my kids are just growing up understanding that I think a lot of kids don't because of the gallery. I made the art installer comment earlier, and you're like, they make a lot of money. And I was like, yeah, that was one of the ways I paid most of my bills when I was younger, because I was making very, very little at the gallery. I didn't own it yet. And I had clients that would pay me to install after work, and I'd be there with my little hammer. So as soon as my son could basically do fractions, I said, I got to teach you how to do this, because this is going to give you a lot of booze money in college, I guess. But
it's a great life skill.
Incredibly
installing, packing art, framing art.
Yep. Well, it also it's teaching him a lot of things for life, but it also, I've told people, if you can install art, you can basically build shelves for a cabinet. I mean, it's all these kind of 3-dimensional projects around the house. All of a sudden it all just kind of clicks and makes sense. And my son's a builder by nature, so he took to it really quickly. But I was like, these are the kind of skills that are going to really, come in handy your whole life. It's not going to be that you can explain to someone the difference between Monet and Manet. It's that you can put a picture straight on the wall. I mean, that's actually really a good thing that I can teach them. So he knows the Monet Manet thing too, but
So you've mentioned movies a few times. Do you have, say, a favorite of all time movie?
My son will tell you that I say everything is my favorite of all time. I'll go, oh my gosh, be quiet. This is my favorite song of all time. He's like, okay, let's add it to the list of mom's favorite songs of all time. That being said, I do have a few favorites. I mean, I would say that if I only had one favorite, it'd probably be Annie Mame, which I just watched not long ago with my daughter for the first time. It's great, classic Rosalind Russell, who's one of my favorite actresses of all time. But the woman in it, Mame Dennis, is very, very reminiscent of my dad's mom. It's very much kind of partially a way I grew up, with this kind of eccentric part of the family that was very, very smart and educated and worldly. My family just didn't have the money. She got to have all that too. So great, great film. So I definitely like a lot of old movies like that. But then also I watched a couple weeks ago, Arno and my husband and the kids were gone, and I was all by myself, for 6 hours, and I didn't have to be at work. and I drank a bottle of wine and watched beaches and cried, and it was wonderful. So I definitely have those favorites too. So I was like, okay, next time's fried green tomatoes. Cannot wait to just do all my favorite early 90s cry fest movies. I always say that one of the reasons that I even kind of considered being an art dealer was because of 6 Degrees of Separation, which was Will Smith's first movie. Stockard Channing, Donald Sutherland, Stockard Channing, again, one of my absolute favorites. But I see this couple and they live in this fancy apartment in New York, and they're all wearing black and big jewelry, and they're having fancy dinner parties, and everyone's so smart. And I'm just thinking, this is the life for me. Crockett, Texas in 1994, it was not my life. I just knew that. And so they were private art dealers. And I remember thinking, well, that sounds okay. Let me figure out what that's all about. So much college, studied art history, but I knew that I didn't want to teach. And so I knew that I wanted to get into contemporary art in general in one form or another. But it's funny because now when I watch that movie, they're such snobs. They're so elitist. Like they're everything that I hate now about the gallery business. It's also, they're having this fancy party with these fancy people. They're trying to get money for this painting. And I was so focused on how cool this whole thing was, this whole vibe, and that they were living with this great art, that I didn't pay attention to the most important part of that movie, which is they're having this thing because they are desperate for money. They are desperate. Their house of cards is about to come tumbling down. That's what I should have noticed. I didn't. I noticed Stockard Channing with a glass of wine and, a fantastic outfit on. And I'd never been to New York. I mean, I was 16. I think it was that idea that I could be kind of surrounded by people who liked the same things I do and that were smart and, had big world views and knew about culture and language and food and wine. And I got all that. I got all of that. I mean, I am surrounded by those people, and you don't have to be in New York for that. And you definitely don't have to be a snob for that. I mean, that those people are out there just hanging out like I am.
It's interesting how watching the movie at different times takes on different meanings. Like, I'm just going to go back to the fact that you mentioned the first time, I didn't notice how desperate those people were.
Right. But also my understanding of sophistication and manners and all of that stuff has changed, that I see that all the name dropping they're doing and stuff is actually horribly rude. I mean, that's not sophisticated at all to be that way. And I'm so turned off by those people in general. That whole, I was sitting around doing the New York Times crossword puzzle in a pen. Well, you don't have to tell me that. You could just say you were sitting at home drinking coffee. Like, unless you're trying to just constantly impress people. How movies and art actually changes as you change is always pretty fascinating. I mean, for the most part, everything I was buying in my 20s, I still love, but there's definitely been things that have gone back to the gallery to be sold just because as my life experience has changed, what I wanted to wake up and see in the morning changed. I mean, a good example is I had this piece called Mood Lifter by Maggie Taylor. And the title is a good, positive thing. It's called Mood Lifter, but it's a person, she's holding her head up, like off of her shoulders. And so I was like, oh, isn't that nice? The idea you can just wake up in the morning and just pick yourself up and you're just going to have this great day. Well, then my son was born. My dad immediately died. Then my boss died. And all of a sudden I owned a gallery and just everything was so overwhelming. All of a sudden when I would look at that, it looked like she was going to throw her head at someone. It looked like that was becoming a weapon. It was no longer Mood Lifter to me. It was like, let me see how many people I can knock out with my humongous head. So yeah, I mean, it was easy for me to say, you know what, I might be bringing something to this that I was not bringing previously. But that's neat to watch too, to kind of learn from that.
I've noticed music can kind of take you back. It can transport you back to whatever time in your life you hear a song.
For sure.
But I think art is the same way. Movies, it's kind of a form of time travel, which I warned you I was going to ask you.
You did. I'm very excited.
If you could time travel, and you have to pick now, where are you going?
If I go forward, can I come back? If I go back, can I come back?
Sure.
Or am I stuck forever?
You're not stuck. It's just like a vacation.
I gotta say, I think I'd do a whole Bill and Ted's thing. Just like pop around randomly, like just spin the dial and just see what shows up. Of course, I mean, the easy answer would be 1920s Paris and, talk to James Joyce and have a drink with Hemingway and then, beat Ezra Pound at tennis. Hard to not think that would be kind of cool. What else would be an interesting time? I'm such a kind of indoorsy person. A lot of times when I think about olden days, all I think is that everything probably smelled really bad, because I'm like a little too prissy. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Let's go see Michelangelo, paint the Sistine Chapel. And I'm like, oh, no deodorant. Everybody would be sweaty. No thanks. Like that doesn't sound fun.
Well, thanks so much for joining us tonight, Catherine.
Of course, I'm thrilled.
Do you have any shout outs?
Follow Gallery on Instagram, sign up for our email list, catherinecouturier.com. Google's gotten very good at spelling my name. So you can just kind of half-ass it and it'll get you there. Facebook, Twitter, all of those things. Come see me at AIPAD. Come see me in Houston. I love meeting new people. Send me an email. You'll see that I can actually be charming, believe it or not. Or you can just wait till Anne comes and you can take a road trip to Crockett, Texas with us.
I do make this little sideshow called Art in the Raw in the Wild. So
perfect.
Good times. So anyways, thanks again for joining us, Catherine, and have a good night. And
you too.
Thanks for watching Art in the Raw. I hope you enjoyed meeting Catherine and hearing about her life as a gallerist and art dealer. If you enjoyed the episode, consider subscribing and telling like-minded friends. Have a good night, y'all.